change is
I'm up now.
oh, cool.
Go on.
Oh no, I was just going to mention the reflection in your glasses sometimes blocks out your eyes.
Yep, it is a bit weird. I can't do anything about it though, except for wear different glasses that don't have the blue tinge. Anyway, yeah, cool. So today what we're going to do is talk about, so we've almost finished our MR. There's only one small problem left, but what we're going to talk about is how to break down this MR into smaller pieces. So at GitLab, we have a policy rule. I don't know. You can't have the MR too big. Guideline is a good one. Yeah. So when we say it's ready, when we remove draft, I'll share the screen. I'll show it. Okay, so currently this MR is in draft mode. So once we remove the draft mode, we'll have a few bots have a look at it. And one of the bots is going to pick up that it's far too big. It's too many changes to too many files. So this is a problem because it's really difficult to review, and it means that it's more likely that people will just say, yeah, it's fine. Looks good to me, right? So what we're going to do is try to work out how do we break it into smaller pieces so that each piece is actually reviewed properly and thoroughly. And yeah, that's it. So we'll talk about how to break that down. And then after that, if we've got time, we'll look into what this last remaining problem. So what we need to work out is which changes that we've done can stand alone by themselves. So which changes can we merge where once it's merged, everything still works. So for example, we cannot merge like, I don't know, like we can't just merge the changes on instant tabs because one, the router won't be in use, two, the tests won't work. You can't add the tests and have them fail. So there's still going to be a fairly large MR at the end of this, but we'll see how we can break it down further. So one thing I wanted to ask was, so we're changing, we're changing the routing here to say that when someone lands on ID/timeline, we go to the component. But if we merge that by itself, it won't break anything, but it will put in like unused logic. Does that make sense? Like if we merge these changes, nothing changes. Nothing changes.
It slightly changes. So before, when normally you'd go to like issue/incident/ID/timeline, and the current master, like before this MR, that goes to 404 page.
Yep.
And then after this change, that would take you to like the summary tab of the incident. So technically it is a slight change, but yeah, so I guess you could potentially even write a test based on that behavior.
Right.
So that could be its own MR.
So that test, that's going to have to be an end-to-end Ruby capybara test, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Because we're changing the endpoint. Yeah. But we can't test this yet. I mean, we can just test it in that, like, is it a 404 page? No, it's not. But like we can't test that it's going to go to the right tab. because the tabs won't be in place if we just merge this.
But it probably does make sense to have that in the test anyway, that you navigate to one of these routes and verify that it actually does go to the right page.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we could update the Ruby test, which is not this one, is it? Because this is a test in Ruby, but it's, sorry, this one. This is a test in Ruby, but it's not the Capybara one. It's just a unit
that's
test.
the helper test. Yeah. So I guess before we even break it up, we've got some more code to add. Some more tests at least. And we also want to handle that. We also want to handle the issues route, which I've already mentioned in another comment.
Which is
the other question I've got. This is just where my Rails knowledge just falls short. Is I don't know if we actually test the route file itself in isolation. So not just in an end-to-end test, but testing the actual routes that get produced by that project routes file. So I'm just going to look that up.
Okay.
To see if there are any specs for that.
Yep. I'll add the to-dos. So still to do, we need to end-to-end testing. Oh, we need to add the end-to-end testing.
Oh yeah. So there actually is there's a file called project routing spec. Which I believe tests that file. But what's interesting is that there's no mention of incidents in there yet, even though we have an incident route already. But so it kind of seems like that was sort of left untested. So maybe you only add tests to that file under certain circumstances. I'm not sure.
We do have a new, Crystal mentioned we have a new team member joining us for 6 months to specifically work on tests. Would that be something they would handle? Or no?
Those are slightly different tests.
Okay.
We have like an end-to-end test suite that runs. It doesn't run on every merge request because it's like quite large. And end-to-end tests always take longer because you've got to run things in like a real browser and stuff. So those like true end-to-end tests, that's what they'll be working on.
Okay.
And we typically don't add those ourselves. They're kind of like managed by the automated test engineers specifically. So that'll be a different case. If we add things to, if we add like a Capybara test, it's slightly more constrained than like a true end-to-end test. So like what we call feature specs, they're like smaller in scope than an actual end-to-end test. So that's what we'll be adding as part of this.
So the true end-to-end test would be like test the whole path in one go, right? Whereas the feature flag, a feature test will just check, does this feature work? The other one will be a bunch of features, I guess.
Yeah. And features, like it can do things like it could create an on-call schedule, then create an incident, check that someone was paged, and then check that like a change in the escalation status was reflected in the timeline. So that's like several different features all acting together.
Oh yeah.
Whereas a feature spec would be more like we load the incident timeline page and we check that it actually requested the right data. Well, that it loaded the right data from the back end and it rendered successfully.
Yep.
Yeah. And our guidance is that for feature specs, we typically we don't test every scenario. We just test like kind of the happy path for new features. Yeah.
Okay.
And
that makes sense.
I think end-to-end tests is even smaller in scope than that. Where they're providing real values, where they're like testing, or where they're providing the most value, I think, is when they're testing the interaction of several parts of the application and making sure that they're working properly together.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. That makes sense. Sweet. Okay, so we need to add the end-to-end testing aspect to do a few things. Indent my tabs.
Possibly the better terminology would be feature spec, not end-to-end spec, because I think end-to-end refers to what the quality team adds, and feature specs are what the engineers add. I'm just gonna double check our documentation on that though. Okay. Yeah, okay. We call them white box tests at the system level, formerly known as system/feature tests.
Okay.
I'll add a link into the chat.
Okay. Anything else to do? Anything else to do before we try to break down the MR?
The other thing would be to investigate adding a route, a route spec unit, like a unit test for the route itself. I'm not sure why we don't already have an incident test in there, but a lot of the other routes seem to be tested directly. So, yeah.
Okay. The white box test is the feature test. White box is using Capybara, which navigates using a virtual, a real browser. I
think it's a virtual browser.
Virtual browser. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, cool.
But
a virtual browser, as opposed to a virtual DOM, which we do in Jest, right?
Yes, that's right.
Makes sense.
Yeah, Capybara can run with an actual browser. But I don't know what it uses by default in our GDK. If you just, it definitely doesn't seem to open a browser.
We got a live comment on YouTube from someone named Paul Slaughter. One of
Cool.
the front end. He says the test you write today is someone else's failed pipeline tomorrow. Thanks for joining, Paul.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, I lost where I was. I was distracted. Cool. So other to-dos.
I think that's it.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
So maybe while we're together, we can talk about how to break out the work between us. I think that would be the most effective use of our time. And yeah, interesting to work out how to separate the MR. I've just done this once, and it was pretty confusing. So it'd be interesting to go through it with you and think about it properly this time.
Yeah. Yeah, nice. And the result might be that we decide not to break it down, but it'll be interesting to at least talk about and see what the options are.
Cool. Yeah. So I guess the wider question is, even with something like the router, so it's being implemented here. Sorry, it's being set up here in the router.js, and then it's being added in index.js.
Added to the Vue app. That's right.
Added to the Vue app. Yep. And then actually used in incidents tabs. So could we add the router, like just router.js and index.js by itself, even though it doesn't actually change anything by itself, but it provides like this setup for later?
Oh, I see. In terms of breaking it down to like a more manageable change. Yeah, I mean, we definitely could. I think generally there's kind of two reasons for breaking something down. One is that there's like too much code, and the other is that there are actually multiple things going on and that you want to separate into different vertical slices. Vertical being like you've got like a complete front end to back end change. So something that works, but the change is like as small as possible. That still provides something new to the user. So if we did that, I think that would fall into the other category where we're breaking it down without adding anything new for the user. Yeah, and from my point of view, I think it's always better to try to go for the vertical slice if that's possible. Okay. So you do the smallest possible change that still provides something new to the user or something useful. Yeah, so we could do that, but it sort of splitting things up like that also has a slight downside in that when you're reviewing it, you can't really know that the first part is correct without knowing what the second part is doing.
True.
And testing, like if the reviewer wants to test it, they can test that it hasn't broken anything, but they won't be verifying that it is necessarily the best way to do it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And that's the benefit that having a complete vertical slice provides, because then you can look at it with the perspective of how it's being used. Yeah, but that said, it's totally not uncommon that that I see like changes like this being merged without any sort of visual change, because it's still better to have like a small number of changes if the MR is getting too big, and it does help. I think it does help with the review. Yeah. So, yeah. I think let's think about that as an option, but we'll try and find a way to break it up vertically if that's possible.
Okay. I did a small amount of refactoring that can certainly go by itself. That was
true. Yep.
So yeah, so one was changing the translation. So instead of using this string, exported the translations. So this is an easy breakout.
True. Yep. Very true.
The next thing was I moved some of the how do you say, some of the functionality from the tab back into here. So a good example is this incident metrics tab. So because using tabs, it does some funny things when you have the tab within the component. So previously this component incident metrics tab rendered the tab itself.
Yeah.
But it's a little bit GitLab tabs doesn't like that.
Yeah.
Can't remember exactly what was happening, but there's just a couple of things that were just not quite right.
Well, I know for instance, if you were to like do a shallow mount,
true,
it would be kind of strange because you're especially when it's not consistent, because some of the tabs are here and some of the tabs are in the child component. So if you had if you were shallow mounting and you're trying to test like the VIF, whether it's actually rendering or not, whether that is stopping the render, that would be a bit weird. It's nice for it to just be consistent, I guess. Yeah.
Yep, for sure. So I think I mainly moved the translations like this because in the timeline tab, it was already using translations. And then I thought, well, okay, I want to keep that. So now we need to move it around. So anyway, I think it's worthwhile.
Sounds good.
But these sort of refactoring, that can easily go by itself.
Yeah, sounds good.
I'll make a note in this same.
Yeah, nice.
Refactoring tabs, and there's also the translation. They can be done together though, right? They're pretty small.
Yep.
They can be split, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah, if this were a much bigger MR, then it might make sense to do those two things separately. So yeah.
but they'll probably be together, and we'll just make the judgment
Yeah.
call once to see how big it is.
Yep.
Cool. And then router we already talked about. The tests, the timeline tab. So this is just the refactoring we already discussed. It's a small change. So keep that in there.
Yep.
They need to be together.
I think it has to be together, yeah, with those other changes.
I did want to ask as well. I changed this to a div. I don't think it changed anything visually. Pretty sure it didn't.
It's a good point because it does change the HTML structure. But I think I've done this exact thing before as well, and the only way that would affect something is if we had some CSS that was expecting not a div underneath, but multiple or something. But no, the tabs component is generic enough that it's fine with the extra layer.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Cool. But yeah, also, if you're adding a div like this in React, you would do an empty component. That's what it's called.
I think it's fragment.
Fragment.
In React, is that right?
Fragment. Yeah, exactly.
When you want to have multiple children, but multiple components or elements at the top level. Yeah.
But the only way I found could do that on Vue was to use a template, but you can't wrap a template in a template.
Right. Yeah.
So
there is actually another way, which is to I believe it's called a functional view component, or stateless view component. I'm just going to look up the exact right terminology. When you use like a render function, you can, so instead of writing an actual template in the template language, you can write a component as a function, and as a component as a object that has a render function, and the render function you can define multiple children without a single wrapper. And I've seen it done in our code, and I believe we have even done it once or twice for that exact reason, that we had a child component, and the child component, it didn't work having an extra layer of like a div or something that does nothing. Like an example would be if the parent has flex styles on it, and you want like evenly spaced items in a list or something, and the child component is the list, having that extra wrapper might interfere with the styles, and especially if the parent is a third-party component, you maybe can't control where exactly those styles are being added, so you have to do something like this, or you could put it all in the same component. But yeah, and it's like an interesting role in Vue, and so it's also kind of interesting that you can get around it with a function.
Yeah. So could you have can we have a stateless, like does nothing component that would just, you could import from like GitLab UI? It's just like a fragment, and it's just a component that wraps everything, but really it's a function with the render value would just be like render yourself and your kids, right? your children. Sorry.
Yeah, kids works. Yeah, I think that's an interesting idea. Could we implement the React fragment component in Vue.js for the purpose of being able to remove that layer sometimes? I would guess that if that's possible, someone's already done that and published it as an npm module.
I did find an npm module that was just a Vue fragment, but yeah, certainly seemed overkill for what I wanted it for. Recently, yeah, I found another way around it. So this is
in this case, I think it doesn't. It doesn't affect this MR. So
no, it doesn't affect this MR at all.
Yeah.
It's just something I meant to ask that.
Yeah. No, it's an interesting question for sure.
Cool. All right, we'll forget about it for now until we need it for next time.
I think that's a rabbit hole that we could go down for a long time.
At least next time I have that problem, I'll know where to start.
Yeah. Sweet.
Okay, back to forward. All right, cool. So, okay, so the index, we're just setting up the router, but setting up the router relies on one, using the router to be complete, and two, excuse me, it includes this setting up the router so that you can navigate to that page, and also in the somewhere else, where was it? Here, in the issuables helper to provide the current path.
Yeah.
So in order to have this files changes, we need the router, we need incident tabs, implementing the router, we need the project, we need the issuables helper, we need their associated tests, which is just about everything in this. Everything.
Yeah, yeah. One thought is that we could sort of approach it from the other direction of like backend changes first. So you could add those new routes, and you could even do a capybara test for that. Just to verify that at a white box test level, the new routes work. Even though it won't navigate you to the right tab, it'll just load the normal incident page. So what I guess a bit more context is I'm talking about sort of adding those changes and then adding a capybara test that navigates to those new routes that we've added. Or maybe just one of them, because we don't have to test every path with a white box level test. And also that test will be the foundation for the final white box level test, which is that we'll want to navigate to that URL and check that, like once we add the client side routing stuff, we'll want to check that works, maybe in a white box test, so we can extend that initial test that we add for the backend routes to achieve
makes
that.
sense. Yeah, I like it. So
yeah, just an idea.
Backend routing. You spell capybara?
C-A-P-Y-B-A-R-A.
Yep.
BARA. Yeah, that's right.
And then, so this is back end and to do with the route, but like, so what this is we're passing the current path, which is the URL that it's at. So we can pass that from the back end to the front end, or to the view app rather, and it won't do anything. But because we can't test it, we'll include it with the router changes. That's where it belongs.
With the client side router change, probably.
Yeah.
It depends how much you want to split it up. Like you could literally just add that one line plus a helper spec update, because I think the helper spec will possibly fail without a change as well.
Oh, I see what you
and
mean.
then so just the helper change and then the helper spec change. It depends how much you want to break it up. This is where it sort of if I were doing it, I would. It depends on the size of the MR, but this might be breaking it up a bit too much.
Yes.
But it's like, as an exercise of how to break things up, it's definitely an option.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and if this were like a really big MR with a lot of changes that touches a lot of code, to the point where it is really hard for a reviewer, this is something you could do. You could break out, just the changes in the helper and the spec changes for the helper, and you could just deliver that. It doesn't add anything to the front end by itself, but it does. So it's not like a vertical slice, but it is a functional change that you can do that doesn't rely on anything else or break anything else. So you could definitely ship it with no problem.
And because
it's the kind of
tests.
thing and because it's got tests, we'll want to update the tests. The other and the other side of it is that like it is sometimes nice to split helper changes out in like a really big MR. Often we would do this would be behind a feature flag if that was necessary as well. That's also a way to break things down. It can help a lot if you put things behind a feature flag. In this case, I don't think it needs a feature flag necessarily. But say we wanted to add like part of the changes, and it wasn't possible to do that without making some behavioral change to the app that wasn't desirable, then you could put it behind a feature flag. Then you're like safe to merge a bunch of changes separately, and then at the end you'd remove the feature flag. So probably not something we'll do here, but in the discussion about how to break things down, I think it's worth mentioning feature flags.
Previously at my last company, we would do that with an epic. Like you'd have one epic, and then you'd do merge requests for merging into the epic, and then you would merge the epic all at once. But instead of that,
I see.
at GitLab, we would use a feature flag.
So when you say merging into the epic, do you mean like onto a separate branch? So you have multiple emails into that branch. Yeah, there's totally another way of doing development. Something that we've decided against at GitLab in favor of feature flags. Yeah, I think there's a good explainer on the feature flag page about this. Yeah, it's probably worth distinguishing that there's two different types of feature flags. There's feature flags where there is some actual reason to turn a feature on and off. That would be like a long-term feature flag.
So we have a good example here. Sorry to interrupt. We have a good example on the timelines because we literally just removed this feature flag.
Yeah.
But initially, for the very first implementation, because we needed to create so many components, that feature flag was like, you don't use this, right? And like initially, it was like,
I think the way we
describe
it is like a feature flag for development.
Right. Okay.
So it's not to allow like certain users to switch it on, but it's to allow us to merge things.
Okay.
Incrementally, without breaking the product. Yeah, and a key property of those feature flags is that they're as short-lived as possible. You want to create the feature flag, incrementally merge the changes that you have to, and then as soon as it's functional enough that it's providing value to the user and it's not breaking anything, then you remove the feature flag for development entirely from the app. So you delete it from the code, you remove the database entry where it's been flipped on. So it's like it never existed.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's the ideal for these development feature flags.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah.
Thanks for the explanation. It's really interesting. Really helpful. Okay, so projects we discussed, incident metrics tab. This is just more refactoring and the associated spec. So that's good. And then this spec. Oh, right. Sorry. This is the refactoring. And this is the spec. And it's separate from here because this is only for enterprise. Right? Yeah. Because metric tab is a enterprise feature. It's not available free.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that still confuses me a bit. Yeah. Cool. All right. And then, so this is our actual incident tabs. This is the main spec and this is the EE spec. And in the EE spec, it only checks this metrics tab because that's the only difference. Whereas this one tests a lot more, so that's why we need to update so many things. Yeah. Sound right?
Yeah. And there's been a slight refactor of that spec file as well.
Yeah, like the mounting.
Yeah, the signature of the mount component method has changed slightly. So that is also something that you could split into two parts.
Could split if we need to.
Yeah.
So,
so the view spec slight refactor. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's another one that if we were breaking down a larger MR than we are, then we'd definitely consider doing those separately.
Cool. Yeah, okay, cool, that makes sense. And yeah, this helper spec just does the helper, so all good. Okay, that makes sense to me. So so then we have a couple of easy ones. So these could be together, I said.
Yep.
So we haven't done yet. And so the routing in view should probably
That would
be
be
done
the
with,
last one, I think.
That's
If we keep it separate.
This is
that's the change that actually does something for the user. Yeah.
So then we will put them in order instead of and the refactoring translations definitely easiest. Refactoring view spec also super straightforward. I don't know about the others.
That's all right. It doesn't matter what numbers you put there. If it's like
Really?
1, 1, 3, it'll still render it correctly. Yeah. That's fine. Markdown doesn't care. Yeah.
That's great. What about double digits? Sorry.
Yeah, I think that works. Yeah.
You can hide heaps of stuff in there.
Yeah. Write a secret message.
Cool. All right. So yeah, this is fine. Backend routing, it doesn't rely on anything else.
Yep.
Helper change doesn't rely on anything else, and routing doesn't rely on anything else. So actually,
routing relies on all of the previous changes, but
so what we really want is 2.
Doesn't block it.
And I actually want 1. Oh, how do I do that?
Or I don't know how you do that actually.
That is 1, and then
some bullet points. Yeah.
These are unordered lists. Yeah. That makes me feel better.
Maybe remove the dot off the 1 and to render that slightly. It's still kind of weird, but at least
pretty.
That's close enough. I think it's understandable. Yeah, first, second. Yeah, so that's how you'd break something down.
Oh, easy.
Yeah.
And then, okay, how do you want to break this up? So some of these have backend problems where we might need help.
Yeah.
That'll do.
I don't think we're going to solve that today because we have 4 minutes left. But yeah, I'd be interested to have a go at that myself, but I don't have like a ton of Rails knowledge, at least in terms of routing. So it would
Might
be
be
like a
another-
learning exercise for me.
Maybe
Yeah.
another good opportunity to get Peter back. Do
Yeah,
another session with him.
yeah. I'm sure he would know the answer straight away.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll ask him for another session.
Cool. And
yeah, I'll
the
organize the
previous
details of that later.
the previous bullet point as well. I think some.
I mean,
some
each of these,
backing-
right? Oh, this one we can do.
Yep,
So
we could do that
how
first.
about, I'll do this.
Yep.
And then to do on yeah, okay. I'll just comment that now and then we can finish this stream and then we'll talk about how to schedule those.
Yep, sounds good.
Cool. Okay, I'll stop the stream.
Awesome.
Thanks for joining.